Welcome, I am Dr. Andrew Barker. This is the Mycroft online lecture for Seamus Heaney's midterm break. And this is a wonderful poem, this one, for your introduction to poetry, to find out the way poetry works. It has a clearly identifiable narrative structure which runs through it. We are genuinely interested, the first time we read the poem, to find out what happens next in the poem. Something has happened and we want to know who it has happened to. It makes us want to read on. The 50th time we read the poem, or even the second time we read the poem, we'll be looking at different things. But the first time you read it, we're interested in what is going to happen next in it. Like all of the Mycroft lectures, what I'll do is read the poem through, and then I'll give you a line-by-line analysis to give you the poem in the simplest English that I can. This will enable you to appreciate the content of the poem, what the poem is actually saying. I'll then look at some of the poetic devices the poet is employing and demonstrate these to you to show that the way the poet wrote the poem is better than the way I have explained it in simple prose. Okay, so this is our first read through of Seamus Heaney's midterm break. I sat all morning in the college sick bay, counting bells, knelling classes to a close. At 2 o'clock, our neighbours drove me home. In the porch, I met my father crying. He had always taken funerals in his stride, and big Jim Evans saying it was a hard blow. The baby cooed and laughed and rocked the pram when I came in, and I was embarrassed by old men standing up to shake my hand and tell me they were sorry for my trouble. Whispers informed strangers I was the eldest, away at school, as my mother held my hand in hers and coughed out angry, tearless sighs. At 10 o'clock, the ambulance arrived, with the corpse staunched and bandaged by the nurses. Next morning, I went up into the room. Snowdrops and candles soothed the bedside. I saw him for the first time in 6 weeks, paler now, wearing a poppy bruise on his left temple. He lay in the 4-foot box, as in his cot. No gaudy scars, the bumper knocked him clear. A 4-foot box, a foot for every year. Now this is a very sad poem, but it's wonderfully, wonderfully done. Now, for those of you who do not know the poem very well, I won't tell you what it's about now. And I'll reveal it to you as the reading progresses, because I think this poem operates on, or with a degree of suspense, in that the first time you read it, you don't actually know what has happened. Obviously, the second time you read it, you realise what has happened, and the 10th time you read it, those sensations of surprise at what has occurred in the poem are no longer there for you. But let's unpack those sensations as we go through the poem. Line by line reading then of Seamus Heaney's midterm break. I sat all morning in the college sick bay. Where is he? Now, plainly he is in a college sick bay. A college sick bay is a room in a college whereby the students who are too ill to attend classes can sit out the lessons. I sat all morning in the college sick bay, counting bells, knelling classes to a close. So, our narrator, Seamus Heaney, is in the college sick bay, counting bells, knelling classes to a close. We can presume that he's ill. There's something wrong with him for him to be in the sick bay in the first place. He's upset because he's hearing we know that he's upset because he hears the bells which ring the classes to a close as knelling. Knelling is the sound made by a funeral bell. It's the dong, dong, dong of a funeral bell. That is a knell. Now, even in Northern Ireland, where the poem is set, school classes are not closed with a dong, dong, dong of a funeral bell. They are closed with a ting-a-ling-a-ling of bells that close classes everywhere else in the world. So why do we assume that this boy is hearing the classes close with the knell of a funeral bell? Now, plainly he has death on the mind. He's thinking about death to such an extent that all bells that he hears sound like funeral bells to him. So plainly someone has died. Now, for our first reading, at this point, we don't know who it is who has died. We must assume that it is somebody close to him, because he's unlikely to be in the college sickbay hearing the classes ending as funeral bells if it is somebody he doesn't know. But at this point, we do not know who it is who has died. And we won't find out until the end of the poem, which is why I say the first reading of this poem is actually unusual. There's a suspense story that goes through it. I sat all morning in the college sickbay, counting bells, knelling classes to a close. At 2 o'clock, our neighbours drove me home. Now that line is one of those actually quite rare ones in poetry, whereby to translate it down, to change the wording in it, to make us understand in the most simplistic terms possible specifically what the poet means, is actually very easy to do, because there's no simpler way of saying at 2 o'clock our neighbours drove me home than at 2 o'clock our neighbours drove me home. I mean, we could say our neighbours drove me home at 2 o'clock, but basically that's all we need to know about that line. The question we ask ourselves at 2 o'clock our neighbours drove me home is, why don't his parents drive him home? And I see three possibilities. The first of which is that his parents are dead. One or both of his parents are dead, and this is why the boy is in the college sickbay, counting bells, knelling classes to a close. The second possibility is that something so traumatic has happened to his parents that they are unable to get behind the wheel of a car. And the third is that his parents don't own a car. Now, the third one sounds comic, but biographically, it's actually the true reason why his parents didn't drive him home. I happened to read this in an interview with him once, and that biographical fact, for me, tends to dilute the power of that suspense image. The fact that his parents didn't drive him home, in reality, is because they didn't own a car. I prefer to believe, as far as the poem tells us the story, that his parents don't drive him home because they're too traumatized by what has happened. And in the next line, we find for the first time that we know it's not his father who has died. And we know this because the first line of the second stanza is, "In the porch, I met my father crying. He had always taken funerals in his stride." Heaney uses a poetic device here called inference, which means to make a conclusion from evidence given. Now, that sounds much more complicated than it need be. I can give you a very simple example of the way inference works. I see a painter painting a picture. I look at the painter painting the picture and I say, "Could you paint my picture?" Now, is the picture that the painter has painted any good? I never told you it was good, and I never told you it was bad. So is it any good? Plainly, the picture must be quite good, because I wouldn't look at the picture and think, "That's a rubbish picture. Would you paint one of me?" Unless I was an idiot. Since I'm not an idiot, you can infer that the picture itself is quite good. Okay. "In the porch, I met my father crying. He had always taken funerals in his stride." Now, why is the father in the porch? "In the porch, I met my father crying." Presumably the father is crying because he doesn't want to be inside the house weeping in front of his family. It's a strange moment for a boy when he sees his, well, it should be a strange moment for a child when he sees his father weeping. Men tend to weep less. Many young men watching their fathers cry is not something they witness on a regular basis. And the boy comes home and he realizes that something very traumatic has happened, because this unusual event of seeing his father cry is occurring. This is a man who had never been bothered with funerals before. "In the porch, I met my father crying. He had always taken funerals in his stride." Now, to take something in your stride means literally, it means you're walking along and there's something in your way and you don't have to alter your step to overcome it. to step over it. To take something in your stride means it doesn't bother you. To take funerals in your stride means that funerals have never bothered you before. So his father is not seemingly a man given to emotion much, or seemingly not a man for whom funerals at least bother him. But something has happened here. Whoever has died is sufficiently close to the boy's father that it has made the man cry. In the porch, I met my father crying. He had always taken funerals in his stride. And Big Jim Evans saying it was a hard blow. Now, Big Jim Evans, he's obviously a large man. He's a big man. It's a sort of community that Heaney comes from where people are known by their size. You know, Little John, Fat Harry, Big Jim. Now, his name's not Big Jim, it's a nickname, Big Jim. So Big Jim Evans says it's a hard blow. Now, a hard blow means it's a big problem. It's a relevant, important thing that's difficult to deal with that has actually happened. Now, we know that it has made the young Heaney upset enough to go to the sick room and hear all bells as funeral bells. We know that it has reduced his father to tears. But we, as of yet, do not know what it is on this first reading. The baby cooed and laughed and rocked the pram as I came in, and I was embarrassed by old men standing up to shake my hand and tell me they were sorry for my troubles. It's a nice touch, this. The baby cooed and laughed and rocked the pram. Cooed is the sound of, like a dove, but babies boo, coo, 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 coo. It's a nice happy sound. The baby's quite happy. Now, what is the relevance here of the baby being happy? And it's that the baby doesn't understand what's going on. The baby is the only one there that is happy. And we get a nice contrast between the young baby not understanding. He doesn't understand because of baby, and babies don't understand things. But the baby is quite happy. And outside, the older father, who understands what's going on, is in tears. We get the contrast between innocence and experience here. Experience is in tears. The innocent baby is cooing and laughing. And note the geography of the poem here. It starts off in the sick room. We've then come to Heaney's family house where his father is outside in the porch, and now we've come into the room. Baby cooed and laughed when I came in, and I was embarrassed by old men standing up to shake my hand and tell me they were sorry for my troubles. There's a lot happening here. Heaney comes into the room, and basically, let's imagine there's a table, because they've got to stand up. Let's imagine there's a table there, and there's a lot of men older than him there. And as he walks in, they stand up and they say, we're sorry for your troubles, Seamus. That's my attempt at a Northern Irish accent here. We're sorry for your troubles, Seamus. We're sorry, son. It's bad news. It's a hard blow. They stand up and they shake his hand. And this embarrasses him. So why does it embarrass him? Now, Heaney's a schoolboy. And he comes into the room and he doesn't know the way the old men, older than him, are going to react to him. Because being a schoolboy, we must presume that up till this point, they just ignore him. And they ignore him because he's a child. And we don't, old men do not stand up and shake the hand of the child. They just ignore the child. But something has happened here, so that presumably for the first time, because the boy is embarrassed by it, he is taken seriously by the adults. The adults don't ignore him. The adults stand up when he enters the room. When the boy enters the room, the adults stand up and say, we're sorry for your troubles. Whatever has happened, it's so serious that it has begun to act as a rite of passage ceremony for the young Heaney. And the rite of passage ceremony is traditionally when a boy becomes a man. It's a symbolic situation. There's not one day boy, man now. But in this instance, the trauma that Heaney experiences makes other people see him as a man. He sees his father crying. He enters the room. The old men stand up to shake his hand and treat him as an adult. And then something else occurs. The next stanza tells us, whispers informed strangers I was the eldest, away at school as my mother held my hand in hers and coughed out angry, tearless sighs. And there's a lot going on in this bit. Now, whispers informed strangers I was the eldest, away at school. Let's do that bit first. That's quite easy to imagine. Heaney has come into the room and he hears people saying, he hears whispers in the background. This is the eldest son, this is Seamus. He's been away at school. Great, very clever kid, going to be a fantastic, famous poet one day, win the Nobel Prize. All that sort of stuff he's going to hear in the background. Right. He's not, but you get my point. Right. So whispers informed strangers I was the eldest, away at school. As my mother held my hand in hers and coughed out angry, tearless sighs. And this is a terrific piece of acoustic observation. The way that Heaney is able to put across a sound here. Held my hand in hers and coughed out angry, tearless sighs. So first off, why is the mother holding his hand? Now, traditionally, he's upset, he comes home. Your mother holds your hand because she wants to comfort you. So we may assume the mother is holding the son's hand due to a desire to comfort him, which is plausible. But is she? Because as she's holding his hand, my mother held my hand in hers and coughed out angry, tearless sighs. And really the only way to do this is to try to make that sound. You have to hear the sound. There's no way I'm going to do this well, but I'll give it my best shot. So a sigh is easy. Okay, so, sigh. A tearless sigh. Tearless doesn't really make any difference to the sound, but tearless does raise the question to us of why is she tearless? And either she's tearless because she's not cried at all and isn't crying, which seems highly unlikely to me, or she is tearless because there are no tears left. She's cried so much, her eyes are dry, and she's cried out. That's what tearless for that one means for me. Coughed out angry, tearless sighs. So angry, tearless sigh would be obviously I'm not going to get that perfect, but you can imagine what I'm aiming for here. Okay, coughed out angry, tearless sigh becomes and however badly I do that, suffice to say that anybody making anything approximating that sound is not offering help to anyone. The person making that sound needs help of someone else. So when Heaney tells us, my mother held my hand in hers and coughed out angry, tearless sighs, we only have to hear what angry, tearless sighs sounds like. This and we get this wonderful acoustic demonstration of distress. Once again, bringing up this idea of the rite of passage ceremony that the boy is going through. The father is crying outside, all the old men are taking him seriously as an adult. His mother is asking for help of him. And then the body comes back. Now we know it's not his father, we know it's not his mother who has died. At 10 o'clock, the ambulance arrived with the corpse staunched and bandaged by the nurses. Staunched means cleaned. 10 o'clock, the ambulance arrived with the corpse staunched and bandaged by the nurses. This is very simple to put in simpler English. The 10 o'clock, the ambulance arrived with a dead body in it. Next morning, I went up into the room. Snowdrops and candles soothed the bedside. I saw him for the first time in 6 weeks, paler now. Now, the poem has changed in geography once again. We're now no longer downstairs in the family room, we're upstairs in the room, and this is the room where they are going to keep the dead body. The body will be kept there for a week. In some cultures, this is unheard of. I taught the poem in Hong Kong once, and the whole idea that you would get a body and bring it into the house for the wake was totally unheard of. Now, the body is there in the room, and Heaney gives one of my favourite lines in poetry to describe the body lying there and the atmosphere within the room. And he tells us, "Snowdrops and candles soothed the bedside. I saw him for the first time in 6 weeks, paler now." The way that this is done is actually very simple, but if you imagine first off what we're seeing, snowdrops are a flower, snowdrops and candles soothe the bedside. So there are candles there, and there are snowdrops being white flowers. White flowers and candles are there by the bedside. And he sees him for the first time in 6 weeks. So we know it's a he who has died. The effect of this I'll come back to later when I look at the way Heaney can do something by his choice of words. But remember that line, "Snowdrops and candles soothe the bedside. I saw him for the first time in 6 weeks, paler now." He's paler now because he's dead. Your body loses pallor when you die. I saw him for the first time in 6 weeks, paler now. He has not seen this person for 6 weeks because he has been away at school. Heaney has been away at school. Incidentally, the title of the poem, Midterm Break. Midterm break is usually the time when the student at boarding school comes home to see his family. The irony of this situation is that this boy's midterm break is to come home and see his family for the death of one of them, for the funeral of one of his family. I saw him for the first time in 6 weeks, paler now, wearing a poppy bruise on his left temple. There's a bruise on the boy's forehead. Your temple is on your forehead. There's a poppy bruise on his temple. He calls it a poppy bruise. Poppies are associated with death anyway. He gets that image out of it. But there's also the whole idea of the boy doesn't look ugly. It doesn't even look like he's been scarred by death in any way. He's lying calmly in this tranquil room, almost as if there's nothing wrong. I saw him for the first time in 6 weeks, paler now, wearing a poppy bruise on his left temple. He lay in the 4-foot box, as in his cot. Now, the 4-foot box is a coffin. He lay in his coffin, as in his cot. A cot is a bed for a child. So plainly the child who has died was very, very young. No gaudy scars. The bumper knocked him clear. A bumper is at the front of a car. What should become apparent to us here is that Heaney's brother has been run over in a car accident. He's hit once. The bumper's knocked him clear of the accident. He's not been run over and mangled, and seemingly with nothing wrong in the body, he's lying there and dead, and he is looking at the body. No gaudy scars, the bumper knocked him clear. A 4-foot box, a foot for every year. Terrific ending to the poem, this. A 4-foot box, a foot for every year. The brother is only 4 years old when he dies, and Heaney's midterm break is to come home to attend the funeral of his 4-year-old brother. Now, this is biographically a truthful poem. Heaney did actually return home for a midterm break to attend the funeral of Christopher, he was called, his younger brother, who was run over in a car accident when he was 4 years old. And he gets this beautiful poem out of the experience. So what we have here is Seamus Heaney's highly biographical poem about him returning home as a student on a midterm break to attend the funeral and wake of his younger brother Christopher, who died in a car accident. Now, some of the poetic devices that Seamus Heaney employs in this, they're They are beautifully done. They're great examples of the form imitating the content. The form, of course, is the way the poem is written, and the content of the poem is what is actually written. So the way in which Heaney writes this imitates and enhances what he is actually writing about. And poetry, when it's at its best, this is for me the difference between poetry and prose, the form imitating content element of it. Let's give you a few examples. This Snowdrops and candles soothe the bedside part I mentioned earlier. Now, Heaney wants to go into the room, the poet Heaney who's writing the poem, he wants to explain to us what it was like to walk into the room where his younger dead brother lay in a very tranquil, serene state. And he does this with this line: "Snowdrops and candles soothe the bedside. I saw him for the first time in 6 weeks. Paler now." And he achieves this feeling of tranquility and serenity in us, the reader, as we read it. Because as we read those lines, we are using sounds which create the feeling of tranquility and serenity in us. For example, he uses sibilance a lot. Sibilance. Now, sibilance is the use of repeated S sounds. It does more than one thing. If you wanted to write a poem about the sea, you may wish to have crash, bash, smash, swash, the waves crashed on the shore, the crashed on the shore. The sh sounds sound like the sounds of the sea. Also, for example, if you wrote a poem about a snake, you may want lots of sounds in it. D.H. Lawrence's poem Snake has lots of double S hissing sounds in it. But also, if you want to create a feeling of quiet in a poem, sibilance is very useful for this, because as the reader reads the poem, they're going shh, shh, shh. So it's almost as if, as I read the poem, I'm holding a finger to my lips going shh. So I don't read the poem loudly. If I read it loudly, it wouldn't sound right. Snowdrops and candles soothed the bedside. I saw him for the first time in 6 weeks. These aren't words which you feel comfortable shouting, because the sibilance is telling you to shh as you do it. Also note the way he uses long vowel sounds. Long vowel sounds, imagine the sentence: the baby waded slowly through the water. All the vowels are long. The baby waded slowly through the water. Which means it's very difficult to say that sentence quickly. The baby waded slowly through the water. It just doesn't sound right. You say it slowly. In this line, Heaney creates this feeling of tranquility and serenity for us by giving us a line that we feel uncomfortable reading loudly and uncomfortable reading quickly. We must read it as snowdrops and candles soothe the bedside. I saw him for the first time in 6 weeks. Paler now. It's wonderfully done, and I explained that to somebody once, and they said, "Do you think he did that deliberately?" Well, yeah, it took me less than 5 minutes to explain it to you. You now know how to do it. I'm sure that Seamus Heaney can do that with his brain closed. You know. Now, another device he uses very well here is to do with enjambment. Enjambment is also known as the run-on line, and it's when a stanza does not end with a full stop. But notice how the first and second stanzas of this poem do end with a full stop. The sentence is fully contained within the stanza. I sat all morning in the college sick bay, counting bells and in classes to a close. At 2 o'clock, our neighbours drove me home. Full stop. In the porch, I met my father crying. He had always taken funerals in his stride, and Big Jim Evans saying it was a hard blow. Full stop. Third stanza. The baby cooed and laughed and rocked the pram as I came in, and I was embarrassed by old men standing up to shake my hand and tell me they were sorry for my troubles. The stanza has not ended with a full stop. The sentence has run on to the next line. Now, it's conspicuous that it's done this because the first two are so obviously ended with full stops. The third one doesn't, and neither does the fourth. Whispers informed strangers I was the eldest, whilst my mother held my hand in hers and coughed out angry, tearless sighs. The stanza doesn't end with a full stop, it runs on. Now we can either say that this is just an accident and he couldn't finish the sentence and kept on writing, or we say there's a reason that he did it. And I think there is. It's that the form is imitating the content. The way that Heaney is telling the poem is doing something to what is happening in the poem. And those changes occur. When changes occur in the boy, it's as if the young Heaney, the narrator of the poem, the young boy in the poem, as he experiences these things in the poem, he's getting such an overload of information that he finds it difficult to contain it, in the same way that the stanzas in the poem can no longer contain this overload of information, so they have to run on into the next line. That seems very contrived if you aren't aware of it, but it's not exactly difficult to do. And I think that when you've become expectant of the stanza to end with a full stop, when it doesn't end with a full stop, something happens. And the something happens, this overload of information running on to the next line imitates what's happening to the narrator of the poem at that point. It works for me. Here's one final one. How does the boy feel at the end of the poem about what he's seen? In many ways, he's very deadpan through the poem. He's very solemn about it. But the final line, for me at least, this final line does something. The final line, of course, being a 4-foot box, a foot for every year. No gaudy scars, the bumper knocked him clear. A 4-foot box, a foot for every year. Now, how do you hear that being said? Should it be said calmly? No gaudy scars, the bumper knocked him clear. A 4-foot box, a foot for every year. That doesn't seem out of place to me to say it like that. But I have a slight problem with this, and if you've read Tom Paulin's book, The Secret Life of Poetry, he really brings attention to this type of specific attention to word sounds. It's very difficult to stress F-sounding words in a poem without bringing profanity to mind. When you stress f, 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 it's very difficult not to hear fuck in your mind. So when you go through this, no gaudy scars, the bumper knocked him clear, a 4-foot box, a foot for every year. Heaney has deliberately put the stress on the most aggressive and obviously sounding associative sound in the English language. Foot box, a foot for every year. And I hear it as if he's saying, what a fucking waste. And I hear anger in the last line of it. No gaudy scars, the bumper knocked him clear. A 4-foot box, a foot for every year. Now you don't have to hear that in it. You can read it both ways. But the deliberate stress on the F sounds in that final line, to me, indicate that at the end, the narrator is justifiably angry at the waste of life that has occurred. Okay, I'll read the poem through one more time for you and hope that you've gleaned enough from this to be able to appreciate it in a way you didn't when I read it for you the first time. Okay, this is the final reading for Seamus Heaney's midterm break. I sat all morning in the college sick bay, counting bells, knelling classes to a close. At 2 o'clock, our neighbours drove me home. In the porch, I met my father crying. He had always taken funerals in his stride, and big Jim Evans saying it was a hard blow. The baby cooed and laughed and rocked the pram when I came in, and I was embarrassed by old men standing up to shake my hand and tell me they were sorry for my troubles. Whispers informed strangers I was the eldest, away at school while my mother held my hand in hers and coughed out angry, tearless sighs. At 10 o'clock, the ambulance arrived, with the corpse staunched and bandaged by the nurses. Next morning, I went up into the room. Snowdrops and candles soothed the bedside. I saw him for the first time in 6 weeks, paler now. Wearing a poppy bruise on his left temple, he lay in the 4-foot box as in his cot. No gaudy scars, the bumper knocked him clear. A 4-foot box, a foot for every year. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the lecture.